Welcome back to part 2 on this series of finishing your quilt. This series is going to be dedicated to the actual quilting of your quilt. So what we need to get started, in order to be able to free motion your quilt, you're going to need a darning foot. This is a basic foot. They have it for most machines. Sometimes this is just a U shape and not a complete enclosed circles. There's lots of different varieties, but you'll want to look into getting one of those for your machine. The next thing you're going to need is a whole stack of bobbins. The more bobbins you can wind, the better, because then you're not stopping to always load more bobbins, and I just keep mine right there nice and handy. And the next thing, which isn't necessary but I find very helpful, is a good pair of machine gloves. You don't need to buy actual quilting machine gloves. You can just use gardening gloves. Those work just as well, but these make quite a difference in your actual quilting. Now, when you've got all those things that you need, you're ready to start. And the first thing you need to do is decide on a design. Now, these are some of your basic quilting designs, and I'll just go over them briefly. This is your basic stipple stitch. It's also called a meandering stitch, and you just start and you're going to go out and around, and it's kind of like making a dog bone shape in a way. You don't always have to do this. You can just do one little loop, but that's your pretty basic stitch. The next one is a loopy stitch, and it's just little looping around. This is very easy, and it's very calming actually. These two are a little bit more difficult, but they are still pretty standard. Pebbling, basically you're going to start anywhere and you're going to circle around, circle around, circle around. Sometimes you're going to have to repeat a shape to get back to where you need to travel to next. You want to be really careful when you're repeating shapes that you stay right on top of your stitching. And you just keep going. Pebbling looks really awesome, but it is a very dense quilting technique and will take a while. The other thing that's quite popular is swirls, and you don't have to have them with these points. You can have them all rounded, but I just like to come in and make a point and then swirl out. And if I want it to go up this way, I just start a new one, but I want it to come this way, so I stop, make a point, swirl in, make a point, and then come back out again. And echo this point. That's what's going to make a difference there. And then this time, you see, I didn't make a point. I just started right into a swirl. And then out and around. I made a point on this one. And in. And then when you get into this area where you want to fill this area in, you're just going to echo each of these points. And then go out and make another swirl out this way. For this particular quilt that I'm going to quilt today, I am just going to use the loopy stitch. I like it because I think it has a cute little Christmassy feel to it. Alright, now the next part is how we're going to be quilting it. I've been taught basically two schools of thought on how you're going to move your quilt around when you're quilting. This is the one I actually prefer. I like to fill up the center of my design a little bit, and then I move out towards the side and fill in this way, going all the way around my quilt. And I fill back and forth as I go around. The reason I like this is because the center is the hardest part, and I like to get it done with first. The other way is to do two sections, and you can start in the middle of your quilt, moving down and out and around and out, and then once you've reached the end of this side, you're going to start on this side and repeat the same motion, moving this way with your designs. The main thing that you'll notice between both of those is that they're always going to be working towards the outsides of the quilt, this working out in all four directions. The reason for that is you always want to make sure that you leave a place to ease outwards. If you do along the outsides first, then every time you're doing this center, if you get any bubbles, there's nowhere to push that out. But if you keep moving outwards, it's just like basting. That way you can push everything outwards. So this is how I'm going to do this quilt, because that is my preferred method. So we'll go ahead and turn on my machine, add my foot to it, and I have already loaded a bobbin. Now, what you need to do to get your machine set up, you can just use a straight stitch. that's absolutely fine. My machine actually has a straight quilting stitch, so I'm going to go ahead and select that stitch. Now this is probably the most important thing. As long as you have a straight stitch, you're fine, but you want to make sure that you set your stitch length down to 0. You're going to be controlling the stitch length by your movement. Then the last thing you want to do is drop your feed dogs. You can see those are down now. And then you're ready to move into your quilt. So I'm just going to pull it over. Now a lot of people like to roll this up into here. I'm more of a squishing kind of gal. I just shove it all, and I just knocked over my tripod. There we go. I just move it all over into this area till I get to where I want to work with. And like I said, here is the center of my quilt. And so I will go ahead, and I like to have my gloves off when I'm starting. Go ahead and drop your foot. Now, to start, I like to try and start on the same color that I'm using so it's not as noticeable. You're going to put your needle down and then hold on to your tail. Bring your needle up and go ahead and see how you get that other little string. Pull that up. That's your back. That's your bobbin thread, and you want to get that out of the way or else you're going to end up with a little tangled mess on the back. Then go ahead and put your needle down again. Now I like to put on my gloves. I just like to have that extra grasp there. Now these really are going to give you a lot of grasp to go on. Oh goodness. There we go. Alright, so I like to quilt within the frame of my hands pretty much. I will move them around quite a bit, but I like to try and keep it in about this amount of space. And you're just going to, you need your needle in the needle down position. Very important. And then once you've moved away from these tails, you can go ahead and stop and cut them and get them out of your way there. And then you can just start with the motion. I'm just doing this little loop-de-loop. And normally I'd work all the way around in the center, but I'm actually going to move out to the outside because I want to show you something important when you get out there. So normally fill in the middle a bit, but I'm going to go towards the outside. When you're quilting, it's important to try and keep a steady pace. Stop as often as you need to reposition your hands. And just loop away, and if you've pin basted, keep an eye out for those pins. That's the last thing you want to do is run over your pins. It ends up breaking needles and hopefully not breaking fingers. And go ahead and travel. Now I don't want to move up at all too much here because I need to go straight back so I can ease that out. But this is an important thing that I want to show you. Once you get out to your outside, it's very important to make sure that your backing here that's not tacked down, you stop tacking it down and you still have all this extra. And it's very common that it's going to want to get caught underneath here. And you won't notice it, and all of a sudden you can't pull and you've stitched your backing right on down. So make sure when you're going out towards the outside edges that you just double check all the time and make sure that your backing and your batting are where they're supposed to be. Now when you come to your edges, I get really close to my fingers, but I go really slow just so I can make sure that it stays nice and smooth down. And that's your basic free motion quilting. Start in the center, move all around, or go up and down, up and down. If you want some more detailed free motion quilting, actual different stitches and techniques, you can see my blog for more videos. So that's it for this part, and I will see you again for part 3 where we'll bind this quilt up.